Mr. Speaker, we recently heard of an 18-year-old male in the care of Child and Family Services who was sexually abused as a child and presumably due to insufficient prevention intervention became in turn an abuser. This cycle of abuse was identified in the 1987 report of Sigurdson and Reed, who said that between the ages of 15 and 16, the victim, without appropriate counseling treatment, often emerged as a perpetrator. The report added, and I quote, "Therapy resources for abused children are glaringly inadequate." I asked the minister, why are therapy resources for children and families still deficient so that the cycle of abuse continues time and time again?
I thank the Leader of the Liberal Party for the question. It is an important issue, providing therapeutic resources to people that have been the victims of sexual abuse so that they can properly deal with that and not in turn become perpetrators themselves. Resources have been put in place, Mr. Speaker. We have put resources in place not only for therapeutic work but for preventive work as well. The overall budget in the Department of Child and Family Services in the child welfare area has actually doubled. Resources are in place, issues are large, and more resources will be committed as appropriate to work exactly with these kinds of issues, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the government has known for at least 26 years that if a child who is abused doesn't receive appropriate therapy, he or she may in turn become an abuser. The government, knowing about this problem, as Sigurdson and Reed pointed out, has the responsibility to intervene and to act to break the cycle and to prevent future abuse.
And she knew.
The only reason we know of this case is that the abuser himself came forward. And surely the government shouldn't expect a victim of abuse to recognize and report when they themselves are repeating the cycle. How will this minister or the Premier change the government's passive approach to one of active and conscious programming to break this cycle of abuse right away?
It is an important question, Mr. Speaker, and that is one of the reasons we put resources available to Tracia's Trust to deal with the victims of sexual abuse. We've put additional resources in place for men that have been the victims of sexual abuse. These resources make a difference when people are trying to deal with the abuse that they've experienced, and in turn we want to help them address those issues of abuse without themselves becoming perpetrators in the future and continuing the cycle of abuse throughout the system and throughout our communities. That's why Tracia's Trust was put in place. That's why we put additional therapeutic resources in place. And I only repeat once again, these questions are important, but it's also important the Leader of the Opposition Liberal Party and the Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party actually support resources in the budget when we put these resources available in the legislature and ask for the money to do the job that is necessary. We will continue to take a forward-looking approach on this. Members opposite always vote against it, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the cycle of abuse continues. On the 18th day of this emergency sitting, our child welfare system continues to be in a state of emergency. The Premier, who has a PhD in social policy from the London School of Economics, not of course an economic degree, should at least be expected to get the social issues right.
Should be.
Even if he's failing on the economic ones.
Don't take things.
After almost 14 years of his government, we still struggle with an increasing number of children being taken into care because the government hasn't been able or hasn't acted to break the cycle of abuse. I ask the Premier what immediate actions he will take today to ensure the child welfare system breaks this cycle so that those who are abused are helped so they do not in turn become abusers.
Speaker, we have made several very specific commitments to stop the cycle of violence. First of all, we've made very significant investments in early childhood development in Manitoba. And there were some excellent news reports this weekend about the Abecedarian approach we're taking in the inner city with families where significant improvements have been made. And they've seen not only improved scores in education and in IQ tests, but also improved scores in terms of how children get along. In our public school system, we have put new instruments in place that teach children how to resolve conflict without victimizing each other. And we're already getting good results on this, Mr. Speaker. We're seeing a reduction of violent conflict in classrooms and on the playgrounds, Mr. Speaker. We are doing that in the child welfare system as well. As I mentioned, we have Tracia's Trust. We're doing that with our after-school leaders program, Mr. Speaker. We're doing that with our Right to Play program, which we just announced last week in 2 First Nations communities in Manitoba, Fisher River, as well as another very significant community that wants to participate with us in that. And all of these investments are intended to help young people
Order,
learn
please.
how to cope.
First Minister's time has expired.